By now he was feeling ashamed of himself. She came out quickly, and when she saw him, she smiled for the first time since he'd met her. A smile that transformed her face for a moment before she remembered not to show relief at his still being there. Then she dropped her eyes in quick decorum. "I'm ready." "All right." Now he was annoyed again. She was so easy to read that he resented the lack of effort. He wanted someone with depth, someone he could come to know over a long period of time, someone whose total self could be unfolded gradually, would be always interesting and never quite completely explored. Instead, he had Edith Chester. And yet it wasn't her fault. It was his, and he ought to be shot. "Look," he said, "you don't want to see that phony Egyptian thing." He nodded across the street to where one of the expensive quality movie houses was showing a European picture. "How about going to see that instead?" "If you want to, I'd like that." And she was so damned ready to follow his lead. He almost tested her by changing his mind again, but all he did was to say, "Well, let's go then," and start across the street. She followed him immediately, as though she hadn't expected him to wait for her. She waited at the lobby doors as he bought the tickets and sat quietly beside him throughout the entire picture. He made no move to hold her hand or put his arm on the back of her seat, and halfway through the picture he suddenly realized that he wouldn't know what to do with her after the picture was over. It would be too early to take her home and thank her for the lovely evening, and yet too late simply to leave her adrift, even if he could think of some graceful way of doing it. He was tempted simply to excuse himself, get up, and walk out of the theater. Somehow, for all its clumsiness and cruelty, that seemed like the best thing to do. But he held the thought for only a few seconds before he realized he couldn't do it. "Why not?" he thought. "Am I such a wonderful fellow that it'd blight her life forever?" But it wasn't that. It wasn't what he was, it was what she was. He could have been the hunchback of Notre Dame, and this same situation would still exist. He had put her in it, and it was up to him to see she wasn't hurt as the result of something he'd done. But what was he going to do with her? He chain-smoked angrily through the rest of the picture, shifting back and forth in his seat. The picture reached the scene where they'd come in, and she leaned over. "Do you want to go now?" Her voice, after 90 minutes of silence, startled him. It was as gentle as it had been when he first spoke to her, before the realization of what was happening had quite come home to her. Now, he supposed, she'd had time to grow calm again. "All right." He found himself reluctant to leave. Once out on the street, the awkward, inevitable "what do we do now" would come, and he had no answer. But he stood up, and they left the theater. Standing under the marquee, she said, "It was a good picture, wasn't it?" He pushed the end of a cigarette into his mouth, preoccupied. "Do you have to go home now or anything?" he mumbled around it. She shook her head. "No, I live by myself. But you've probably got something to do tonight. I'll just catch a bus here. Thank you for taking me to the movie." No, that's all right," he said quickly. Damn it, she'd been expecting him to try and get rid of her. "Don't do that." And now he had to propose something for them to do. "Are you hungry?" "A little." "All right, then, let's go find some place to eat." "There's a very good delicatessen just around the corner." "All right." For some reason, he took her hand. It was small but not fragile. She seemed neither surprised nor shocked. Wondering what the devil had made him do that, he walked with her down to the delicatessen. The place was still fairly empty, and he led her to a booth in the back. They sat down facing each other, and a waiter came and took their orders. When he left, Lucas realized he should have thought of what would happen when he came in here with her. They were cut off. The high plywood back behind him separated them from the rest of the room. On one side of them was a wall, and on the other, barely leaving people clearance to slide in and out of the booth's far seat, was an air conditioner. He had let himself and the girl be maneuvered into a pocket where they had nothing to do but sit and stare at each other while they waited for their food.